Hey guys, my oldest childhood memory is actually playing hockey in my backyard. I remember I had to wait for the snow to melt. I ran outside, grabbed 2 yellow hockey sticks, an orange ball, and my mom was giving me one-timers, slapping them away. Awesome childhood memory. Fast forward a year, and snow melted, ran outside, grabbed the 2 yellow sticks, orange ball, called for my mom, and she slowly made her way out to the patio and slowly sat down. What had happened was over that year she developed MS, and it made it very difficult for her to walk. But the 2 things she told me that day, and it's just always still in my mind, is the first thing she said to me was sometimes your body doesn't allow you to do the things you wanted to do, so you can't rely on athletics your whole life. And the other thing she said is, even though I can't play with you today, it brings me great joy to watch you play. So I'll sit here and I'll watch you play. And then from that day on, whatever I was on a football field, track, court, you name it, I was always playing for my mom, and actually she came out to the majority of my games, and she still flies out to BC 3 times a year to come see games. We have wheelchair accessible, so she's still going. So that's just my inspiration. Fast forward a little bit when I was a young kid, and I remember digging through my crawl space, and I found this championship jacket. And I'd seen some of them around in town, at the mall or at church or some other places around, and I was pretty enthralled by it. So I brought it out to my dad, and I said, "What's this about? How do I get this?" He says, "Well, you don't get this jacket, you earn this jacket." And he started telling me about this tradition-filled 40-year history of this high school program, and how important it was to be a team, how you kept your helmet on, and because as soon as you took your helmet off, you became an individual, and how we didn't wear our names on the back, because if you wore your name on the back, you were an individual, you only cared about the one on the front. So I was really taken in by this tradition, and it was something that I just really, really, really wanted to achieve, is get my own championship jacket. As I'm growing up, I find a bunch of my friends, about a dozen of us, we all had brothers, cousins, uncles who had also played in this program, so we all had this same goal. It was almost like a 10-meter high dive that we all wanted to jump off. So football. 7th grade comes around, and I break my leg. Now for the first time, I'm away from football, and I remember what my mother told me, that I might have to do something other than athletics at some point in my life. So at 12 years old, I launched my first company. I learned how to fix slow computers. My little brother went around and delivered flyers around the community, and before I knew it, people were dropping off their computer at our house. My little brother was 10 years old. He'd pick the computer up, close the door on them, give it to me in the basement. I'd fix it, and 2 hours later, they'd pick it up. All transaction done through my 10-year-old brother, $50. We had a very successful business. So now I was in the cast for 10 weeks, get out of the cast, and back to football. 2 weeks later, I break the same leg again. So we had the most successful business on the street for 6 months straight. It was awesome. But that was actually the first time that I was taken away from sport, and it was actually a really great experience for me. So fast forward into high school, now I'm at the spot where with all my buddies, we all played football together, now we're trying to win our own championship jacket. Game 1 we win, Game 2 we win, Game 3 we win. We go undefeated the whole first season. We win our championship jacket. Now we're in the elite of what we grew up as the biggest thing in the world. Now we're with them. Next year comes around, we win 1 game, 2 games, 3 games. We go undefeated again. We win 2 back-to-back. Now this is never heard of. So this 10-meter high dive that we all wanted to jump off of for all the people in the community before us, we now surpassed them. 3rd year comes, 1 game, 2 games, 3 games. We won everything again. So we went undefeated all 3 years. We won 3 back-to-back championships, which had never, ever been done before. And it really made me realize that all of us blew up this idea of what it would take to be, a champion, and we made it so big that we actually surpassed everyone that came before us, and it really made me realize that really anything is possible. So when I was in 11th grade, I sent out my highlight tape to 50 schools across the states. I remember it was 50 because $20 per FedEx package, and I only had $1,000 saved up, so 50 schools it was. I didn't send to Harvard at that time, but I sent to a number of them, and they all got back to me and said, "Hey, we'd love to see what you do in 12th grade. Get back to us in 12th grade." I said, "Great," and now I'm feeling all good. I got this stack of all these envelopes, excited. 12th grade comes around. I almost kicked back a little bit. I didn't have a prep schools to teach me. I didn't have a good counselor to teach me exactly the timelines of everything. So by the time I sent out my package to all these schools, I did include Harvard this time because after winning 3 championships, I said, "Hey, why not?" I was told that this was the greatest, and I couldn't do it, and we did way past that, so why not try Harvard? So I sent it all out. I'm starting to hear back from schools, but this was in late February, and the majority of them have already had their National Signing Day, so they're saying, "Hey, we would have loved to have you, but we've already given out all our scholarships. It's not going to work out for you." So I had all my choices across Canada, but I still really wanted to go to the States. I wanted to be focused, away from home, worried about football and school. and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do. Then I get this letter from Harvard in March, and they say, we'd like you to come out for an official visit. Now, they ran a little bit of a later official visits than most other schools because they don't want to interrupt a lot of their students during exam periods, so it worked out. And in my head, I'm like, wow, had I had signed a letter of intent with one of these other schools that were maybe a Plan B or another Canadian school, I wouldn't have been able to go to Harvard. So now it must have all worked out for some kind of reason. So I had to add a few things to my application. I put it all together, about 100 pages. I get to Harvard, and I'm doing one-on-one interviews. Then I'm doing an interview with 27 people, it felt like, around this table, and they're asking me all types of questions, athletics, academics, what's 17 times 19, just really trying to get to who I was instead of just a checklist of how to do an interview, right? You guys are going to prepare your students for interviews. I would say don't prep them as if they're actually in the interview room, because it's the worst thing ever, because they can see right through that. So there I was, prepped for an interview, and they could see right through it. So 2 weeks later, I get this piece of mail from Harvard. We regret to inform you, you did not get into the class of, I can't remember the year, 2005, I think it was. So I was kind of down, but I said to myself, I'll never get any speaking gigs about the story that I just about got into Harvard. So I should probably get into Harvard, and then maybe I'll have a successful future. So a year goes by, and what I did over that year was I talked to a football team, and they said as long as I played high-level football, I could come back. I talked to admissions. They said, get better SATs, make yourself more well-rounded. You kind of showed up to us when you were a kid, you were two-sided. You were football on one side and academics on the other. And now you've kind of put together this resume. You're kind of like a cube. You've got a few volunteer commitments. You kind of got like 6 or so sides to you, but you got to have more sides than that. So I went to Edmonton, won another national championship at junior football. I used my story of getting into Harvard to get me a management position in hospitality. So I was building a resume. I took my SATs again. I reapplied to Harvard, and I also reapplied to 49 other schools. Now I'm getting letters from all these other schools because I was on time, and Notre Dame's, Boise State's, Purdue, these big football programs, Cal Berkeley, good academic programs, but I have to sort of turn them down because I want to go to Harvard, so I want to wait for a little bit of later admission with Harvard. So I say no to all these. A lot of mentors in my life think I'm crazy, but I'm like, I'm going to go to Harvard. So I show up to Harvard now. They have 200 pages of application, 27 people, 17 times 19, no big deal, I got it. Kill the interview. But one guy pulls me aside at the end and he says, well, you were outside of academia for the past year. You don't know what it's going to be like to read 1,000 pages a week, write 100 pages a week, do 2 problem sets a week. You were managing a restaurant and playing football. It's just, you don't know what it takes. So 2 weeks later, I open a piece of mail from Harvard. We regret to inform you, you did not get into Harvard. So now all the mentors in my life are saying, told you so, nana boo-boo. And I'm sitting there high and dry. So I said to myself, I'm never going to get any speaking gigs about the 2 times I didn't get into Harvard. So I better try this again. So I anonymously called, admissions told me to move on, and football told me to move on, but I anonymously called 25 schools, prep schools in the States, the top schools that had admitted students over the past 10 years to Ivy League schools. Finally got in touch with one in Ohio. They heard my story. They let me come out there. So when I was out in Ohio, for the first time, I wasn't just building this resume. I wasn't just making a checklist. I was actually just taking courses that I probably could get my butt kicked in. So I took zoology. I took advanced bio. I wasn't just trying to get a 4.0 GPA. Harvard admissions told me once they had 35,000 applicants in a year, and 20,000 of them had perfect GPA, perfect SAT, and played a stringed instrument. So the things that made you unique in your own little pool made you the same as everyone else. So I really put together what I felt was a good resume. I came back to Harvard, 300 pages, 27 people, 17 times 19. They looked at me and said, hey, listen, if we just let you in now, will you just please stop sending us applications? Guys, I made it. You're supposed to give me a round of applause here. So quickly, the first thing that happens, I'll be brief here, but the first thing that happens when you get to Harvard is now, so I built this 12-meter high dive, now I made it to Harvard, right? No one thought I could make it. But you show up and you're around all your classmates and they all made 12-meter high dives, so to them, you're nothing, right? They're just your peers. So how do you better these guys and girls around you? So the first thing you try to do is you try to come up with a wildly successful company so you can leave Harvard without graduating. Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Matt Damon, great people, right? Didn't graduate, stuck it to Harvard. Yeah, got them, right? So that's my plan. So while I was playing football, I actually had 3 shoulder surgeries over those 4 years. And every time I had a surgery, I went and created a new company, one in sales, a financial business, and then later an architectural business. And it was great to get away from football and to start these businesses. Unfortunately, I know what you're going to say here. It's what am I going to tell my parents? But unfortunately, I actually had to graduate from Harvard. It's because I didn't come up with a company successful enough. But what I will say is along the way there, when I decided to go the architectural route, I decided I could go to MIT at the same time. So I cross-registered MIT, put together essentially a whole other application process for them, got into MIT, so I was simultaneously going to both to finally better all my peers at Harvard. Just quickly, so what did I learn from this? This whole process is actually the greatest thing ever for me of getting into university, because it actually molded and taught me how to become like a geodesic dome. Like instead of having 2 sides or 6 sides, I just had so many sides that I was almost like a sphere. And that process is what got me through Harvard. Whenever things became difficult, I said, well, it took me 3 years to get here. Whatever I got to face when I'm here, I'll do it. And when I was at Harvard, I was sleeping 2 hours every 10 hours. So anytime that I come into trouble now, I just think, well, geez, if I made it through Harvard, I can do whatever I'm doing now. So nowadays in my life, what kind of geodesic dome? I'm still playing professional football. I'm managing my own wealth management practice at the largest firm in the nation. I sit on many boards, and probably the one I'm most proud of is the one for the MS Society of Canada, because obviously my mother has MS. But you know, just the creation of the geodesic dome as a kid has created such a better person in me today, because I'm actually living through not just a checklist of a life. I'm living through what I'm really passionate about and what I really love. And I would say that's where it all starts for any of your students is find what they're passionate about, find what they love, and that's how you build their application, because making a checklist is just going to get you laughed at 2 times by Harvard, and no one wants that. So thank you very much.